Today, we're diving into one of the biggest, most devastating subjects in all of human history, the Second World War. What we're going to do here is try to unpack this enormous conflict, piece by piece, from where it all started to how it consumed the entire globe, right up to its absolutely horrifying conclusion.
So you really have to ask yourself, how did this happen? I mean, the world was still recovering from the war to end all wars, right? And then just 20 years later, it finds itself in a new conflict that would make the first one look small by comparison. How does that happen? Well, that's the big question we're going to try and answer. So let's get into it.
Okay, here's how we're going to tackle this. We've got 5 sections. First, we'll look at the leftover tensions that really planted the seeds for another war. Then, we'll get into this idea of total war. After that, we'll cover the huge military turning points. Then, we have to confront the genocide at the heart of the war. And finally, we'll try to wrap our heads around the unbelievable human cost of it all.
To really understand World War II, you can't just start in 1939. You have to go back. Because this war didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Its roots go deep, planted in all the anger and the instability that the First World War left behind.
You know, when you lay it out like this, you can really see how one thing led to another. It's like a series of dominoes. It all starts in 1919 with the Treaty of Versailles, a peace treaty that, for many Germans, felt more like a humiliation. Then, 10 years later, boom, the Great Depression hits, and the whole world's economy collapses. That chaos creates the perfect environment for extremism, which leads directly to Hitler taking power in 1933. And while all this is happening in Europe, war had already started in Asia when Japan invaded China in 1937. So by the time Germany rolls into Poland in 1939, the world was basically a tinderbox just waiting for that final spark.
And if there's one word, one single idea you need to understand about Germany in the 20s and 30s, it's this one: revanchism. At its heart, it's about revenge. It's this deep, powerful national feeling of wanting to get back what you lost: your land, your pride, your power. And this feeling, well, it was the exact fuel that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party used to rise to power.
And when you look at what the Treaty of Versailles actually demanded, you can see why that feeling was so strong. I mean, this wasn't just a peace deal. It felt like a punishment. Germany had to accept all the blame for the war. They were saddled with these insane reparation payments that completely wrecked their economy. Their military was gutted, and they lost huge chunks of their land. All of this together created this deep, simmering resentment that would eventually boil over with devastating consequences.
All right, let's move on, because in our second section, we're going to see how World War II completely changed what war even means. This wasn't like other wars. This was what we call a total war. A situation where that line between the soldier on the battlefield and the civilian back home, well, it pretty much gets erased. Everybody becomes part of the war machine.
So what does total war really mean? It means the war is everywhere, and it involves everyone. It's a war with no boundaries. It wasn't just about what the army was doing hundreds of miles away. It was about what you were doing in your job, what food you could buy, what you did every single day. Everything was pointed toward one single goal: winning the war. And this quote right here from a Londoner named Mrs. Olive Day, it just brings that huge concept down to a really personal level. This was her everyday reality. Imagine your bedside table not just having a book on it, but a gas mask and a flashlight, because you might have to run for your life at any second. Imagine living in a house where the windows are gone, replaced by oiled linen, and you're constantly sorting your trash for scrap metal. That was life on the home front. The war was right there, on your doorstep, every single night.
Now, to keep this massive war effort going, you needed workers, millions of them. And with so many men away fighting, nations turned to women. Just look at these numbers from Britain. In only 4 years, 1.5 million more women joined the workforce. And it wasn't just about the numbers, it was the jobs they were doing. Women who'd always been told their place was in the home were now being pushed to work in factories, building planes and ships. It was a massive social change, all driven by the war.
So how did they get millions of women to make this huge shift? Propaganda. A whole lot of it. Governments created these very specific images, these types of women. You had the patriotic housewife doing her part by managing rations. Then you had the tough, can-do, Rosie the Riveter type, proving she was just as capable as any man in the factory. And you had the glamorous girlfriend whose job was to keep spirits high. Each one was a carefully designed tool of persuasion to get women on board with the war effort.
For the first few years, it honestly looked like the Axis powers were unstoppable. They were just this juggernaut rolling across Europe and Asia. But then, things started to change. A few massive, incredibly brutal battles completely flipped the script. And in this section, we're going to look at how the tide of the war finally, decisively turned. Victory didn't happen overnight. It was a long, bloody, step-by-step process. It started down in North Africa, clearing a path to invade Europe from the south. Then came the absolute game-changer on the Eastern Front, Stalingrad. From there, the Allies pushed into Italy, knocking one of Germany's main partners out of the war. And all of that set the stage for the final, massive blow, opening up that second front in the West with D-Day.
It's almost impossible to overstate the importance of Stalingrad. It was more than just a battle, it was a meat grinder. The fighting was street to street, house to house. For the Germans, taking the city with Stalin's name was a huge symbolic goal. But the Soviet counterattack was devastating. They surrounded and completely destroyed the entire German Sixth Army. Stalingrad didn't just stop the German advance, it shattered the whole idea that the Nazis were invincible. It was the beginning of the long, painful retreat all the way back to Berlin. So if Stalingrad was the turning point in the East, D-Day was its twin in the West. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched the biggest sea invasion in the history of the world. I mean, the logistics alone are mind-boggling. Thousands of ships, thousands of planes, all perfectly coordinated. Getting a foothold on those beaches in Normandy finally gave the Allies the second front they desperately needed. It forced Hitler to fight a massive war on two sides, and that ultimately sealed his fate.
We have to take a serious turn now, because you can't talk about this war without confronting its darkest, most evil center, the Holocaust. It wasn't an accident of war. It wasn't a side effect. It was a central goal of the Nazi regime from the beginning. The war was the chaos that allowed them to carry out the systematic, industrial-scale murder of Europe's Jews.
This quote from Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel is so important. It gets to the heart of it. Yes, the Nazis persecuted many groups, but their war against the Jewish people was unique. It was a plan for total extermination. You were a target not because of something you did, but simply because of who you were. All Jews were victims.
And maybe the most chilling part is how they planned it. In January 1942, a group of high-ranking Nazis met in a beautiful villa outside Berlin. They weren't screaming or shouting, it was a calm, professional meeting. They were there to coordinate the logistics of the final solution, how to efficiently round up and murder millions of people. It was evil, but it was a cold, calculated, bureaucratic evil.
6 million. It's a number so huge our brains can't really process it. 6 million men, women, and children. By the end of the war, 2 out of every 3 Jews in Europe had been murdered. Entire cultures, entire communities that had existed for hundreds of years, just wiped off the map.
And that's why an image like this is so critical. It pulls us back from the abstract number and shows us a human face. This young girl was one of the very lucky ones. She got out of Vienna on what was called the Kindertransport, a rescue mission that saved about 10,000 children. But for every single child like her who was saved, so many more were not. This is a reminder of the individual person, the individual story at the heart of that giant number.
Okay, in our final section, we have to look at the aftermath. The Allies won the war, victory was achieved. But it came at a cost, a price so high it's almost impossible to fully comprehend. We have to look at the final, terrible math of World War II.
Just take a look at this table. The numbers are just devastating. The Soviet Union, around 27 million dead. China, an estimated 20 million. Think about that. More than half of all the deaths in the entire war happened in just those 2 countries. And Poland lost nearly a fifth of its entire population. These numbers are just staggering. And here it is, the final number. The estimated total is 75 million people dead, soldiers and civilians, from bombs, from bullets, from genocide, from starvation, from disease. Let that sink in for a second. This one war killed 3% of the entire population of the planet at the time. It is, by a massive margin, the deadliest conflict in all of human history.
So we're left with this question at the end of it all. We've seen how it started, how it consumed the world, and what it cost. After going through all of this, after seeing the unfathomable price that was paid, the most important thing we can ask ourselves is, what are the lessons? What are the things paid for with so much pain and blood that we have a duty to carry with us and never, ever forget?